Just say hi. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Let me know if you guys can hear and see me, if the signal is good, if there's any problems. Welcome to the first ever This Guy Edits web stream. And unfortunately we had to switch over to this window because I couldn't actually activate the other one that you probably started off with. But hopefully this works. So let me know, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, if you can see me. Talking to the people in the chat room as well. All my students just gave me a thumbs up, which is good because they're giving me quality control. Let me show you the room that we're in. Let me see if I can switch over. There we go. Okay, so you should be seeing the classroom in a mysterious film school here in Los Angeles. It's accredited, it's the real thing, and these are real film students. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Is this confusing to be in the middle of a webcast while you're actually supposed to be learning how to edit something?
Not really.
Yeah, not really.
You do that all the time.
Oh yeah.
Good. You guys have to speak up a little bit more. The microphone is over here, so if you want to say something, just project. So Aiden, give me a sense of what's going on in the chat room so we can see if we can hear you, Aiden, as well.
Okay. So it looks like everyone's just saying hello so far. Someone asked if there are any rules, so I'm a little scared about that. But besides that, everyone's just saying hi and being friendly. So.
Okay, good. So Aiden, just wave into the camera real quick and look. Yes, that's Aiden.
Hello.
You're a film student. And then right to you we have Robert. Robert, maybe you can say hi as well.
Hello, how's it going?
The camera's behind you.
Oh.
Right there.
What's up? How's it going?
Okay, good. Awesome. So, and then there's Anna in the background, and Erica, and Michael, and then you see a guy with a camera. That's Dustin. He's going to be capturing the whole thing for later when we're going to cut this into an actual episode. So before I get started, is anybody wanting to ask some questions to the student first, maybe as a warm-up? Is anybody in the chat room right now who is in film school? Let me know, and if you are, how you feel about your experience. And if you're considering to be going to film school, let me know as well. So, and while people start typing, I'm going to give you just a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about. This live stream is going to be between 30 to 60 minutes, depending on how well it's going. If we'll run out of stuff to talk about, it'll be shorter. And we're going to be talking about a topic that I already mentioned in the previous video that I released. And it's about how do you get started with an edit? How do you overcome that initial hurdle of making something work and getting into it and have a smooth transition into your edit. So Aiden, did anybody respond? Do we have some answers?
Yes, a lot of people. Some people said they're in film school. Others said they're considering it, but they don't want to waste money. Someone said they just graduated. Josh Harris said he just graduated. Raman said he's starting a documentary film school this fall and interested in cinematography, editing, and color grading. Let's see. Someone asked, what's your favorite movie?
What's my favorite movie?
Yes.
I have 3. I'll answer that in a second.
Okay.
Can people hear Aiden when he's talking? Can you guys hear that in the chat room? Let me know. Or is it muted and quiet and hard to hear? Keep going, Aiden.
All right. I'll
just
see.
project.
So a lot of people just pretty much said they're in film school and either getting into film school or graduated and still learning, or just freelancing and picking up. Oh yes, Lednerg says it's just a hobby. So yeah, there's a wide variety of people.
Top 8 asked a pretty good question. Says, how's the approach of teaching in film schools?
Okay.
Schools, so plural.
All right, I'll answer that one. So for me, this is a really interesting experience because, let me switch over to me. This is really, I'm fairly new at teaching. So this is my 4th quarter, which means I've been teaching for a year now at this film school. And I really am just sort of an adjunct instructor. So I come in, I'm still a working editor. I come in once or twice a week and do 1 or 2 classes about editing, advanced editing. And so it was interesting for me to get used to teaching and to understand what the skill level is of people in film school. And the good news is the skill level is really high, so they're very sufficient with the software, cutting things together. Maybe the downside is that connection between what is a real project and what is a student film, that it still feels a little that there's a difference. And what I love to do, and the students can tell me whether I'm succeeding at this, is to bring real scenes into the classroom with real actors to be cutting those projects and get a feel for a real industry project. And it's a learning process for me to sort of balance theory, which I have to read up on my own, do a lot of studying and doing a lecture, and then doing exercises in there. So Robert, in your experience, how well am I doing with balancing?
I think you're doing well. This is actually my 3rd film school in a way.
Feel free to look at me.
Oh, yeah. I've been to a couple schools before this. The school I went to before this was more of a technical schools for post-production, and we learned a bunch of different post-production applications. So, it was very specific to that post-production. And then I went to Columbia College, Chicago, a while back for feature film production. I did a program there, and that was before the industry changed into what it is in the way of technology, digital technology, the digital technologies that we have now, the linear editing softwares that we have now, and then also some of the changes like the writer's strike and a bunch of things that went on in Hollywood that affected workflow and how studios acquire product and how it's distributed. So a lot of changes since the first film school I went to, and overall I would say each time I go, there's stuff I've learned, but then there's always something new that I learn. So I feel like it's been worth it for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. What about you, Anna?
About your teaching style? Or
How well am I doing? Plus, does it make sense to go to film school?
I say it does. I have no training back in my hometown, no access to any materials to start making films. So for me, film school was kind of a need because we have all the lights, all the cameras, and all the teachers that tell you how this stuff works in the real world. So this is my first film school. I've been here a year once the fall quarter starts again. And so you're my 3rd film teacher, well, with editing specifically. And you have a calmer pace than my last one, who was very, very quick. It was always like move, move, move. So I can enjoy that at times, it's a give and take.
Okay, very good. Calmer pace.
Yeah.
I gotta speed it up. Good. I can talk about my experience. I studied at a film school. I went to AFI, American Film Institute, which is considered to be a very good school. And at the time, it was almost affordable. Let me switch over again. Nowadays, it's pretty expensive to go to AFI. I think at the time it was 11,000 a quarter, and doesn't want to switch. I'll just keep talking while I try to figure this one out. And my experience was that the best part of film school is actually the people that you're going with. So the network that you're creating in school, those people, those friendships that you're building, will carry on into the industry when you start to get your first job. And oh, there we go. Here I am. And when specifically, I studied actually producing, not directing. So I immediately was able to get a couple of offers from fellow directors who wanted to hire me as a producer. Now I decided producing wasn't really for me. Eventually I ended up becoming an editor. But that network of people that I'm working with, like cameraman that shot my student film, we worked on 3 or 4 features together, and we've given each other work over the years. That network just keeps, those are the strongest bonds you'll probably have. And so I think that's the number one reason why you should go to a film school, is really because of the peers that you have that are at the same level that you are in terms of your passion, your drive, and your skill level, and you grow with them. Some of the things that you actually learn in film school, how can you edit, how can you use a camera, all that stuff is fairly easy to learn on your own. But then you're really on your own, and you can try and, if you're in a local town, build that network as well. But I find that's the number one benefit. Any more questions from the chat room?
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a couple.
Okay, go for it.
So, Top 8 asked, how do you stay financially stable? And that's also related to Mac Like a Boss, who asked, are you a freelance editor? If yes, how many projects do you have in order to make a living?
That's a tough question. Okay, I'm trying to switch the cameras, but the cameras won't switch. Okay, so the answer is, at the beginning, it was fairly easy for me to make a living because I would take any job that I could get, and usually the next job would be sort of a step up. So fairly early on, I was fortunate that I got out of film school. I did an indie feature in Pennsylvania where I was doing like a live webcast. That led to a meeting with Dave Cameron, who's the younger brother of James Cameron. That led to becoming an assistant editor on their project, onboard documentarian, and then ultimately becoming an editor on the 3D IMAX film. And from that point forward, I could always get work. What quickly happened is that the work I was getting wasn't as interesting to me than the projects that I wanted to really be doing. And so every once in a while I would pull back from that and do my own things, and then I would have my way back into the industry. And then I was doing a lot of TV stuff, and for a good 5 years that was good enough for me because it paid all my bills, and I could just sort of build and mature and have a family and all that stuff. But now I'm really at a point where I really want to just pick projects that interest me. And the past 3 films that I've done with Mark, who's an independent film director, the budgets are super low at a point where it doesn't really allow me to just live on that. I have to do other things on the side, which is commercials or branded pieces, but I think it's totally worth it. I enjoy telling these kinds of stories more. So now I'm looking less at, as long as I sort of get by, I'm okay with it, but I really just want to do projects that interest me creatively. And YouTube is certainly one of those projects right now. Sorry, long answer. What's the next question?
Madsen had a question for you. He says, to what extent does how is your professional editing impacted by movie watching?
In your leisure time, when you're watching movies in your leisure time, does it affect
Yeah.
your profession?
Well, first of all, when I watch a movie, I don't think about the editing at all. As a matter of fact, most of the time I can't really see the editing, especially when it's a good movie, because then the editing is sort of invisible at that moment. So if I watch a Scorsese movie, Wolf of Wall Street, I'm not thinking about how did Thelma Schoonmaker cut that scene most of the time. I just sort of get lost in the story. But now that I'm actually teaching and I'm doing the channel and I have to like look back at movies and analyze them more and reflect on it, I'm starting to understand more the concepts. But for me as an editor, I'm very reactive and not analytic. So when I cut on instinct, and oftentimes I don't quite rationally understand why it's working. It's just working for me as a story. Cool. Maybe one more question, then we move on to the topic. And maybe a question that doesn't relate to me personally, maybe something for the students.
Books Legacy I would say, what software do you use for editing? What would you recommend for beginners?
Okay, let me point this back to you guys. What software are you using and what do you recommend?
I started on, like, at the very beginning with Windows Media Player because it was already uploaded. But I asked around on YouTube what the folks who I followed, their like fan vids and fan trailers, what they used, and the answer I got most was Sony Vegas. So I got Sony Vegas Movie Studio 11 from Best Buy, and I upgraded it last year up to versions 13 and 14 now. So I have 3 versions of Sony Vegas, and it's still kind of like my first love in editing programs. So it's a simple jump, I guess.
Okay.
From one to the other, worked for me.
Cool. What about you, Michael?
Well, for me, the easiest to work with was Premiere, but that's probably because that was the first one I really learned on. And like, I don't know, when I looked at it, it just kind of made sense. Like everything was easy.
Yeah.
Like straightforward. Like, okay, this goes here. You do this by pushing this button. So with other programs, like I'm starting to get into Avid a lot more. It's a little more difficult, but it's good to have multiple like editing softwares on your belt because a lot of it is the same once you like look at the two. So that's always good to have.
It's good to know more than one, that's for sure. And maybe one more. How about you, Erica?
I started editing on Avid. So I had an amazing professor who taught me the ins and outs of how to use the program. And I find that a lot easier than Premiere, but I've learned how to use Premiere because it's a simpler program to use. But I prefer Avid.
Nice. Yeah, actually, I'm not very well versed on Premiere. I'm trying to do it here in school because the students mostly work on Premiere here. I definitely know my Avid. I made most of my money on Avid, but I'm starting to love Final Cut 10. I've done a feature on it, I've done a commercial on it, and now I'm doing like a TV pilot on it, and it's just a pleasure to be working in that software in terms of the intuitive speed and flow, just being in a flow state. But the client often will decide what software you'll be using. If you work in TV, if you work in scripted TV or reality TV, most likely you end up cutting in Avid. Same for feature most of the time, but if you do anything that's like branded or web-based content, most likely it will be. And right, so the topic, and how many people in the chat room have seen the last video that was titled How to Start and Edit? Let me know. In that video I covered 3 methods that I'm using. And the first one, I'm just going to quickly summarize those. The first one was go for the goal. This was probably the most controversial one because what I'm suggesting there is you start off with your gold moments. That are the best moments that you have in your cut or in your selects, and you already throw them into the timeline and you just see what kind of interesting connections come out of that. Because if you put two moments together, they want to have meaning between the two of them. That's what editing is. It creates meaning beyond the first shot. And so I know I was going to use this performance, this take of an actor anyway, because in that close-up she started crying genuinely about something that is different from any other way she did it in all the other shots. So I'm going to put that in there, and I know I'm going to somehow build the scene in a way that that close-up makes sense. And so some of the criticism of that method was, well, don't you just need to follow the script and just do it the way that the director wants the scene cut? And that is true. You always want to please the director, you want to respect the writer, and you want to cut it in a way that they envisioned it. But there's something happening, and I can say for the top directors that I've worked with, they embrace the fact that you are a storyteller and a full collaborator, and that you might have a different response to the actual footage than the script or the way that they originally intended it. And most of the time, the top level directors really appreciate if you're giving them a take on what they've seen one way all the way through and see the story potentially told in a different way. Doesn't mean that it has to end up being that way, but it opens up a creative collaboration between the director and the editor in a way that if you have that goodwill or you've established that trust where the director doesn't feel like I'm trying to own him or I'm trying to fulfill my own agenda, it has the potential for the film to really flourish because you're really utilizing the best potential that you actually ended up with the footage that you shot. So for example, Thermo Schoonmaker and Martin Scorsese have a relationship where they trust each other 100%, and she barely reads the script. She gets the footage, building the story, just puzzling it together, and editing is really building the story. And she gains an understanding of the story by working with the material, letting the material speak to her. And that method number one encouraged that in a very fast and efficient way. And Scorsese does it with his actors too. Like, he encourages them to take the script and then just go run with it and try 20 different things. And then they have 20 different choices in the editing and play with those. So now, Robert, you had a different take on that. We discussed this earlier. You were saying you first want to see your script executed the way that you intended because you're also a producer / director. So maybe give us your counter argument.
I don't know if it's a counter argument just so much as a specific workflow for the whole production process. And that workflow is specific to me when I am the writer, director, producer of like a project I have. I find that what I want first and foremost is to see what I've written and mapped out from a visual perspective and a directorial perspective, cut together just to see what it looks like. And then if I do have an editor that I'm working with, I'm most definitely open to creative input, but for my creative perspective, I like to see what I've mapped out already complete and then move from there with an open mind that, just because I saw it in my mind one way doesn't mean that that's the way it has to be. But I definitely want to see that pre-work that I did, cut together.
Yeah, and I mean that's important that you want to respect the director. You want to make sure that he or she sees her work reflected, her concerns, her notes, her vision is being executed. And maybe with a first-time director, I wouldn't be as forthcoming with trying to just tell the best story right off the get-go. I would be trying to maybe follow the blueprint more closely first and then nudge the director towards other options. Showing a lot of options is a good idea. I would never refuse to do a note if a director has something very specific and he wants to see it. I wouldn't just say, no, that's not going to work, or I've tried it while you weren't here. I'm going to explore that idea with him, and then hopefully together we make the right decision. Ultimately, it's about what's the best story that you can tell. And if the team, the collaborators feel like they're all on the same page and they are pushing towards that same goal, then usually that works out the best way for the film as well. So that's method number one. Is there any response in the chat room that maybe we need to acknowledge?
Well, there's one person that asked, would you collab with Neil Breen? But that was unrelated.
I would totally consider it. I would totally consider it. I think I might actually make his movies not work anymore because I would try to make them the best they can be, and then maybe they become not what they are right now. Right now they're very charming and you want to hug them for what they are.
Yeah.
So that would be a very interesting experiment to find out whether that actually would make the film better or not.
Yeah.
Ooh, Josh Harris asked a pretty good question. How many eyes do you share your edit with before producing a final cut? That is, how many people do you bring in to collaborate on an edit?
Not that many. It depends a little bit on the project, but like the latest features with Mark, we were super protective of the cut until we both felt like we're ready to show it. Then we did a test screening, and with people that didn't know about the film, and then we just sat down and discussed those reactions and then addressed notes. But specifically at the beginning, when we don't feel very confident yet that it's the best it can be, we try not to show it to people. We just want to be in our own space and figure out what is there still to be figured out before we show it to other people.
So, Joe asks, is gold different? Is gold different from the script usually?
Well, gold is not usually. Gold can be just like a take or a moment or something that happens. The cut is usually different from the script. I really rarely have a film that is really executed the way that the script was written. Most of the time, just get changed around, they disappear, they get shortened, or they get just completely rewritten in the editing room. And that is for big budget, low budget. It's another pass at making the best movie that you can.
Alexander Shepard wanted to know, says, what if you don't have a personal laptop? Are there any great editing programs on tablet?
That I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking they're all going that direction. I know you can be cutting a movie on your iPhone nowadays, but I haven't done it, so I wouldn't know. Okay, why don't I move on to method number 2 in the video, which was set the bar. This is a really... Many times I'm recutting a scene over and over the first 20, 30 seconds, and I just want it to feel really, really good before I move on. Now at the beginning it was a little stressful because I thought I'm spinning wheels, I'm not moving forward, but I think it's time well spent, because once you set the bar, you can actually show it to somebody, they can get excited, and also the rest of the scene seems to come more easily. And that also goes with when I start a new project, specifically when I have a new client. I show them 1 or 2 scenes that are fully polished and set the bar, that they can take a deep breath and can be relieved that it's going well. So my intention is to show them something to really impress them and show them how well this movie is going to come together. And this way I get a lot of goodwill in just having the space to explore the footage and find the story, because they know ultimately it's all going to end up at that level. So setting the bar early for first-time collaboration is really important to get goodwill. That's method number 2. Method number 3 is music as inspiration for a scene. Again, there are a lot of people that feel like that's the wrong way to cut, to take music and then let the music inform the style of cutting. And that is true, and it might be a good idea to cut something with music, take the music out, and then revisit the cut and see if it still makes sense visually, dramatically, is it really as strong as it can be. But what music does is it takes you in interesting directions, and there's some universal truth to music as well. And so I like the idea, every once in a while I want to play, every once in a while I just want to build structure. And when I play, usually music is involved. So I like, especially at the beginning, like the last episode that I cut on YouTube, the first thing I did is I looked for the right piece of music to get me into the episode. And it was from Andrew Apple Pie, again, amazing. And found a completely new music that I've never worked with before. That's important, something I've never really used before that just got me excited. And so that's a very good way to get into the editing. Do the students maybe have an idea how to just get a smooth transition into an edit? How about Anna, you were looking over?
Yeah, just a general edit, or are we still on with the music?
Just a general, like when you start a new project, what's do you ever face this editor's block where you just don't know how it's not working out, you're not getting anywhere, or you just start?
No, I just start if we're going chronologically, okay, what's the first scene, what's my coverage of the first scene, and then you just, watch all the dailies through and through, make notes about them, and just figure out, okay, what's the first thing I want to see, open on, and then you just do that and go through.
Okay, so very method.
Yeah, I'm looking at where I am right now on the timeline. I'm not worrying about all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get to my head. It's just, okay, right now in this moment I'm focusing on making this cut. And then, okay, that's good. What's the next step?
So it's like baby steps.
Yeah, kind of. It just gets there, and the next thing you know, you're done.
Not get overwhelmed by the size of the project, the amount of footage. Yeah, that's very good to just take one step at a time, especially with documentary. That's important. There's so much footage. Anybody else? How do you get smooth into an edit?
I think it kind of just comes naturally sometimes too.
Yeah.
At least when you pick the gold moments, like you've taught us, you get a basic structure, and then once you go through it enough, you start coming up with ideas in your head. And I think that's why editors think so differently, because they just naturally transition into that mindset where you form a story based off good moments or good segments.
Yeah. To tell a story in a way that transcends the linear way it was envisioned originally. I think that's one of the most interesting contributions an editor can make. To see a big picture and take it apart and put it back together in interesting shapes. Okay, good. So then there are a couple of methods that I have that I didn't mention in the video, and the first one is a radio cut. Now, what's a radio cut? How about you guys? What's a radio cut? Does anybody in the chat room know what a radio cut is? Does anybody in the classroom know what a radio cut is?
You saying radio or regular?
Radio, like the opposite of TV.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that.
Okay.
I hadn't heard of that one either.
Okay. How about in the chat room? Anybody?
They're asking tons of questions, but not the radio cut.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Kripa does know.
I got one that says audio cut. A radio cut is audio only.
Correct. That's exactly it. Cutting just the audio, just the dialogue or the voiceover, potentially some music already and some sound effects. You're cutting it as if it's playing on the radio and you're not seeing the visuals. And that's really helpful when you're cutting, especially voiceover. So for example, if I do an episode on the channel, I figured out what my script is, how I record the script, and then I just lay down the voiceover first. And I start restructuring, I'm taking things out, and I'm just thinking about the structure of the piece before I really worry about what I'm seeing. So that's the first stage, and slates in there. So I'm like, okay, at the beginning I'm going to be seeing the opening sequence of Guardians of the Galaxy, which I'm cutting right now for the Science of Editing episode number 3, which starts off with Guardians of the Galaxy 2, that opening scene, and that gets me into the episode. I'm not going to reveal what the episode is about, other than it's about blockbuster movies and narratively what's going on there. So I have that conversation that I have, and this episode is a conversation between myself and Dr. Karen Perlman. I lay that all out. That's a 1-hour conversation. So if I would take that and then start cutting, it would just be a waste of time. So I'll cut it down, I cut it down to a 10-minute conversation. Then I put my slates in there. What movies do I want to see where, what animations, what graphics, what B-roll, and send it back to her. We have a conversation about this, and we're starting to really work on the flow of the episode. And by doing it this way, I'm not wasting a lot of time on just trying to make things work visually. I just focus on story structure. So that's a great way to cut a scene like that that has voiceover. It works very well for any sizzles that you cut, which are like trailers for TV shows that are being pitched. It's very good for commercials and industrials, that kind of stuff. Method number 2. That's method number 4 actually. Method number 5 is actually procrastination. And there's a certain type of procrastination that's actually very good for editing, which is you start off with something and you just start an edit. You sort of dip your feet in it and you try a couple of things and then you walk away. And you don't cut it for a day, you just sleep over it. And what that does is, because your brain already has some basic information about the scene, you can put it all together in your head, and some creative solutions are happening without you actually having to cut it. And then you come back the next morning and you cut the scene, and many times my experience has been it just flows. I get in there, I get my coffee, and for like 2-3 hours it just comes out of me. So it's a very good method to do an edit if you're stuck. And usually what I do during a day, like in the morning, I cut a scene fresh, and then maybe I run out of steam, and so that I don't lose half a day, I use the second part of the day to just select for the next scene that I'll be cutting down the road and get that organized. That's something where my brain doesn't have to creatively struggle so hard. That's very methodical. I can't get that word. It's very systematic, and so I don't have to invest a lot of creative juices in that. And so that's a very good one. Somewhere in the channel there's an episode where I actually demonstrate that model on a scene where I started, walk away, procrastinate, come back and cut the scene within minutes. So look for that. Then I have a really good method which is called, and so that's a very good one. Somewhere in the channel there's an episode where I actually demonstrate that model. I can hear myself. One method number 6, I believe, and that is the deadline looms. It's so easy to cut when you actually have a real deadline, and you just got to get things done. And I'm a big proponent of meeting deadlines all the time. So before you are good, you have to actually do the work. And meeting deadlines is super important to me. Most clients will rehire you not just because you're good, but you actually met the deadline. And a client, even if it's not going well and you still need to do more passes on a project, a client will respond more favorably to working with you on the solution if you always come back with, you always over-deliver and you undersold what you will give them. And part of that is meeting your deadlines. And it's a real good motivator to just hunker down and know, okay, I have to deliver a scene in the morning because I have a screening with a producer. That is a great way to get started on an edit. And then the last method that I have, which is number 7, is to emotionally don't care. Sometimes it's really hard for me to make a scene work because I can't invest myself into it emotionally. And at that point, I just step away and just say, you know what, I'm just going to cut it. I'm just going to cut it. I don't care how it's going to turn out. I'm just going to cut it. And by just removing myself out of, like, my emotions out of the process of cutting it, I can just put something down that is something to work with and then reinvest myself. So to distance yourself from sometimes just saying, you know what, I don't care, I'm just going to do it, is important. I mix it.
Offline.
Spinning wheel deck
Yeah,
right now.
I think it's reloading.
Okay, let me see what's going
Spinning
on.
wheel of death.
Well, it held up pretty good. Huh?
There we
It's
go.
There we go.
Back
Alright, we're
on.
back.
Oh, we're back on. Something happened, but we're back on. So the question was, what was the question?
Do you mix sound as well?
Do I mix sound? I do mix sound. I'm not a professional sound mixer. There's an episode on the channel where I actually talk to you, our sound mixer, on many films that we worked on as a team. But I make it sound as if it's the real deal, because it helps the director to experience his movie, and I get less notes. When something sounds rough, it looks rough. It looks like it's not working. So you got to make it sound as if it's the real finished product. And by doing this, we can focus more on the real issues at hand as opposed to technical issues. So I mix a lot myself. Same with color. If it looks good, it's good enough.
Alright, there was another one. Can you elaborate on why being chronological in your editing is more important in documentary editing?
I don't know if it is. I think he or she might have misunderstood. I think what's important with documentary editing is to just take one step at a time, because it's so overwhelming of a project. So you just gotta, like, put your head down and just focus on the little things that you're working right this moment, what was being shot in the scene. But a documentary overall most likely will be completely out of the chronological order it was meant to be told, or it was shot, or things might have happened, because you probably need to split up the storylines according to your characters. You need to set up things that didn't necessarily happen that way, because nothing is really pre-planned through writing. It's all just happening. You're just watching it and you're capturing it in the moment, and then in the editing you're telling the story. Okay? That's a good one. Do you have one more?
Yeah, someone just asked, do you always use original footage in your edits, or is it okay to use footage from popular shows and movies?
In actual films, not okay. It's got to be original, or you got to get the rights, obviously. If it's a documentary, you got to figure that one out. For YouTube, I use all kinds of stuff, whatever I can think of. If a moment in a movie pops up in my head and says, oh, this is going to be a good tag to this beat that I'm cutting right now, I'm going to just cut it in. And that's the great thing about YouTube. It's like you have so much freedom creatively. Nothing has to, like, be of the same style or the same. It doesn't need to be consistent. It can be anything, as long as the story engages the audience. Cool.
Where do
Tom
you...
Bates says he likes your hair.
Oh, thank you. My hair? Good, I didn't style it this morning.
Where do you get your inspiration?
all kinds of stuff. Watching other films, movies, getting ideas from that. I recently watched a really interesting movie by, I think it's called the Royal Ocean Society, and it was like, why do we go see movies in the summertime or something? And I thought that was just a great video, and it actually inspired me to do a video that I'll be doing soon about a similar topic, which is why are we filmmakers? And the idea obviously is inspiration. You should never copy somebody else's work. You should put your own spin on it. You should innovate, do a remix, and make it interesting again in a different way that is authentic with you. Maybe one last question, and then we'll wrap it up. How's everybody feeling about this
What do you
webcast?
think
Was this successful? What was the takeaway? How can we make this better if we were going to do this one more time? I think we might do this in September one more time. So let us know in the chat room if this was worth your time, if this is a great experience, if you want more interactivity or more lecture. Do you want to hear the students more and have me talk less? Let us know, and I'll take one last question.
All right.
It says, what about, again, it says about today's topic, if one of your methods doesn't work for you that day, do you just switch, or how do you figure out which method works today? Does it depend on the theme?
It depends on the project and how I feel that day. Yeah, so I'll switch it up. Switching it up is really important. It's always good to just be engaged and interested in what you're working with and whatever gets you there. If it's music that you're listening to, like oftentimes I drive into work and I hear a great song that I haven't heard before. I just download it and put it in the timeline, start cutting. And if it doesn't come to me, then I'll try something different. But ultimately, I have to get something out of the day, so something has to happen. It usually does. That's a good thing about editing. You only have like this many choices. Everything is limited by the material, so you can't get too flustered. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this. And once again, let us know if you did or if there's some things we can improve upon. I want to thank the students here for putting up with this experiment. I thought it was really cool. I want to thank the school for letting me do this. And I'll see you on the next video. Have a good one. Bye-bye.